All right, peace, family. This is Asafo Shaka Sekou, and doing another virtual lecture on behalf of the bARTer&Build think tank. The title of this lecture is Financial Literacy is Not a Cure for Black Poverty. And this is an open challenge to the so called experts who uh, like to try to lecture us and sell us on the idea that financial literacy is a solution for the economic stagnation, the economic problems that we have as a community, when that's simply not the case. Now, like I do with every other presentation, or I have intentions to do with every other presentation, I have to apply some caveats to the lecture and let people know that this is not saying, so you see the screen. This is the title of the lecture. Financial literacy is not a cure for Black poverty, right? Now, nowhere in the title of this presentation and nowhere in this presentation do I suggest that people shouldn't be financially literate. Nowhere do I suggest that people shouldn't, you know, have an understanding of budgeting and things like that. Okay. This is not saying that financial literacy has no use whatsoever at all. This is addressing the question as of financial literacy in and of itself. Financial literacy being a cure for Black poverty. Okay. Like always, this is brought to us by the bARTer&Build think tank. We, have a collective of us who, work together to, try to push forward different policy, Black-centered policy and what have you. You can find us on Facebook, or if you have any questions or concerns or want to reach out to us, you can contact us at the email address below, barter.buildthinktank@gmail.com. So the premise, number one. Oh, but before we begin, let me explain one more thing. So the presentation was scheduled for 6:00, right? Due to scheduling conflicts that came up at the last minute, we weren't able to wait until 6:00, and we decided to go ahead and do it earlier today to go ahead and get the presentation done. Now this will, if you're not watching now, it will air on at 6:00 at the regularly scheduled time. But those who are watching now, you're welcome. Again, this is an open challenge to the critics, open challenge to the experts rather. So I don't want to miss the opportunity. I don't want to deprive any of those people who may have questions, who may have criticisms, who may object to this presentation, to have a chance to respond and what have you. So if you're watching now, you're welcome to respond. We'll have that time available after the presentation, or you can send us, you can chat, or type a question, and we could set something up at a later date. But we're not able to do it at 6:00. But I'm more leaning toward doing something at at a later time where everyone who has a criticism of this presentation will be able to come on, and we'll just have like a more formal discussion. All right. So with that said, the premise of this presentation is that financial literacy is simply not enough to get people out of poverty, and I'll demonstrate that with the data. Number two, many of these programs are focused on fixing Black people and making them acceptable in the eyes of the market, rather than changing the system. Many of these programs rely on the false notion that Black deviance is the cause of our poverty. So, and again, financial literacy kind of plays on that idea, that plays on that narrative of, okay, well, these people are poor because they don't know how to spend their money right, or don't know how to manage their money correctly. I'll show in the presentation how that's just simply not true. Number three, the saturation of our public discourse of financial literacy as a solution is part of a broader neoliberal project to obscure the role structural and governmental forces play in the maintenance of Black poverty. Okay, I'll demonstrate that as well. Number four, organizing to demand redress from the government is not begging the white man. We hear that a lot. I'm going to show how organizing and demanding from the government what is due to us is a part of our Black tradition. Okay. So this report is entitled "What We Get Wrong About Closing the Racial Wealth Gap." And this is a report that was completed by a team led by William Darity and Derek Hamilton. So a team of economists or public policy researchers came together and put this report together, a 67-page report, and it's detailing the different myths that we hear about how Black people can close the racial wealth gap with white folks. And I would instruct you to read it. Everything that I present here, please go back and read it. Okay. So what's going on? Okay, it seems that we're having some technical difficulties. Just bear with us a moment. Okay. Okay. All right. So it seems that the presentation that we were doing, Geechee was helping me with the presentation, and he's notifying me that the power just went out. For Christ's sake, good grief. Okay. So let's see what we can do here. Okay. So we're gonna give us a few more minutes and give Geechee a chance to come back on. So this is what happens when we're live, ladies and gentlemen. So we have to kind of roll with the punches. So Geechee just notified me. He just reached out and said that the power's back on now. So just give us a moment. Let's give him time to come back on. If you all just bear with me one moment. Okay. So we thank you so much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you're having trouble hearing me, let me know. Let me know in the chat. So someone asked, "Are we taking questions?" Yes, we will take questions at the end of the presentation. So again, this is the pitfalls of doing this live. Anything can happen. We just want to express our appreciation for your patience while we were having some technical difficulties. All right, so let's. Okay, so again, this report it says the following. It concludes the following about financial literacy, and I'm reading it. This is directly from the report. Greater financial literacy can be valuable if an individual or household has finances to manage. Financial literacy without finance is meaningless. There is no magical way to transform no wealth into great wealth simply by learning more about how to manage one's monetary resources. While wealth begets wealth, typically no wealth begets no wealth, regardless of how astute a money manager the person may be. So that, as far as I'm concerned, is the definitive conclusion that we should simply reach when it comes to financial literacy programs. You know? This is from the Washington Post. The title of their piece was "More States Are Forcing Students to Study Personal Finance. It's a Waste of Time." I'll be doing a lot of reading during this presentation because I want you all to make sure you have what the experts are saying about this, what the economists, what the financial folks, and what they say about this. I just don't want to lean on my opinion. I want to read it directly from the people who would know. All right, so this is from that piece. The most comprehensive meta-analysis of financial literacy program evaluations, published in the journal Management Science in 2013, examined 168 papers covering more than 200 studies. 168 papers covering more than 200 studies. It found that financial literacy education was responsible for a 0.1% change in financial behaviors like increased savings or reduced borrowing. Yes, that's 0.1%. A more recent meta-analysis of 37 experimental studies, which are more reliable than observational studies of financial education in schools, trumpets a more promising effects. But if you dig into the details of the working paper by scholars at the German Institute for Economic Research, you find that with careful controls, the estimated effect on actual financial choices is also vanishingly small, with 0 being in the range of possible effects. Another recent working paper by scholars at Goethe University in Frankfurt, Germany, suggests that even those alleged minor positive results might be overstated. The authors analyzed 14 papers, 9 of them in the United States, focused on students, low-income earners, or migrants, populations you might think would benefit from a financial crash course, and conclude that there is some increase in short-term knowledge about financial matters, but, quote, no proven evidence of long-term behavior. So essentially what this is saying is that the financial literacy classes are not having any effect on the behavior of low-income earners. There's a minimal, and even minimal is being generous, minimal effect. The article continues, quote, "The failure of financial education to change how people handle money is important, but the blind faith in such lessons to fix America's financial problems also obscures important facts about the U.S. economy. The reason most Americans' finances are in terrible shape is not the failure to budget, not because they don't understand interest rates, and most definitely not because they buy too many lattes, as the personal finance writer Helene Olin recently laid out in the Washington Post. No, Americans' finances are in terrible shape because the cost of higher education health insurance, childcare, and rent have all increased far faster than paychecks, unquote. So again, that goes back to the initial statement from the report that you can have as much financial literacy as you want, but if your financial situation has you where you're just not able to apply that financial literacy, it's meaningless. It doesn't matter. And the person who wrote this piece was Timothy Ogden, who's the managing director at the Financial Access Initiative Research Center focused on financial services for low-income households. And that center is housed at New York University's Robert Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. So this fellow would, definitely know a little bit about financial literacy. Now, this opinion piece, this is from the website of the National Endowment for Financial Education by Billy Hensley, PhD, Dr. Billy Hensley. And the piece is titled, "Stop the Tired Argument Asserting Financial Education Does Not Work." Wait a minute, Asafo, why would you have an opinion piece like that on your presentation? Wouldn't that undercut your argument? Hold. Let's read what Dr. Hensley says. He says, at first, we have a better understanding of what financial education is and what it is not, and what it can and cannot accomplish. It builds knowledge, boosts confidence, and is the cornerstone for better decision making. We're not inherently born with these skills, so experience shapes our reality, and timeliness matters for transactional decisions. Financial education is not a one-time inoculation. It must be reinforced with booster shots throughout life. Okay, so this guy and this gentleman and his organization are the leading people, one of the leading groups in the country that deal with financial literacy. Again, this is Billy Hensley, PhD, President and CEO of the National Endowment for Financial Education. I want you to keep that in mind with what I'm about to read to you. He says further in that same piece, our community, stop there. Now, what is he talking about, our community? When he says our community, he means those of us who teach financial literacy, those of us who teach financial education, our community of financial education teachers. Our community, however, must be transparent and acknowledge financial education doesn't solve everything. No one in our field should depict financial education, as a silver bullet that creates financial well-being. There are limits. Socioeconomic disparities hinder financial health. Housing is expensive. Healthcare costs can cripple a household budget, and young adults grapple with student loan debt. Education, and when he says education, he's talking about financial education. Education alone cannot overcome the racial wealth gap, gender pay inequality, or other barriers to financial capability. While education can help people navigate the financial system as it exists, there are numerous factors outside one's control that influence ability to apply or not apply education to specific situations. Thoughtful policy and regulation, economic conditions, and availability of appropriate financial services are just a few of these influences. Okay, so this is a supporter of financial literacy and financial education, and he has to add that caveat into his piece, into this article, saying that no, financial literacy is not the cure, is not a silver bullet that's going to cure people's financial problems, that there are exogenous factors, there are factors outside of one's control that only policy can handle, that only public policy can deal with. Okay, so next slide here. Bad financial decision making, predatory loans. We hear a lot about people making bad decisions by getting a predatory loan, one of those payday loans or what have you. or one of those loans where you got to sign over your title to the title loans. So what does Derek Hamilton, Dr. Derek Hamilton, an economist, one of the leading economists on Black issues, what does he have to say about it? He says the following: much of the framing around wealth disparity, including the use of alternative financial service products, focuses on the poor financial choices and decision-making on the part of largely Black, Latino, and poor borrowers, which is often tied to a culture of poverty thesis regarding an undervaluing of low acquisition of education. Pay attention. The framing is wrong. The directional emphasis is wrong. It is more likely that meager economic circumstances, not poor decision-making or deficient knowledge, constrains choice itself and leaves borrowers with little to no other option but to use predatory and abusive alternative financial services. And the source for that, the title of the research paper, is The Political Economy of Education, Financial Literacy, and the Racial Wealth Gap by Dr. Derek Hamilton. Okay. Okay. So bad financial decision making, another aspect that we're told about often is in savings. Okay. So the first column is from that same report I introduced to you at the beginning of this presentation, what we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap. It says here, the findings advanced in peer-reviewed articles in economic journals is clear. There is no evidence that Black Americans have a lower savings rate than white Americans once household income is taken into account. Once income is controlled, if anything, Black families actually have a slightly higher savings rate than their white counterparts. This mild savings rate advantage is indicative of even greater thriftiness among Blacks, since they typically have more kin obligations to assist low-income relatives, which further reduces the ability to save. If anything, it appears that Blacks generally live more frugal lives than whites. A study conducted by the Institute on Asset and Social Policy using the 2013 Survey of Consumer Finances found that at comparable levels of income, whites spend 1.3 times more than Blacks. But the narrative that we hear often is always the reverse, right? The narrative is that, oh, Black people are just spending all their money and they can't save or anything like that. Okay, so that's one thing. The other column, this is from a book called Knocking the Hustle by Dr. Lester Spence, who studies political science, who teaches political science at Johns Hopkins University. He says in his book, the data suggests, for example, that contrary to the idea that Blacks tend to spend frivolously, Blacks are fairly frugal. Contrary to the idea that Blacks are broke because of spending habits, Black financial troubles are driven by significant increases in the cost of education and housing rather than the Xbox 360s. Drilling down on specific segments of the Black communities, Black college students have accrued a lot more debt in student loans than their white counterparts. In fact, they are more likely to drop out than white students because of their student loan debt. Several years before the housing market crashed, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, found that almost 50% of home refinance loans in predominantly Black Baltimore neighborhoods were subprime, compared to only 6% in predominantly white Baltimore neighborhoods. This debt isn't accumulated because people spend too much time at the mall, or because they bought one car too many, or because they waited hours in line for the next pair of Air Jordans. Okay, so that talking about the subprime loans and in Black communities, one of the largest contributors to that was J.P. Morgan and Chase, which is information you'll need to remember for what we're going to talk about later on in this presentation. So the evidence is clear. The empirical evidence indicates that it has not been the case historically, nor is it the case today, that Blacks are more financially wasteful than whites. That's from the data. That is the conclusion reached by the reporting. Okay. What about investing, you say? You know, these financial literacy experts or so-called financial literacy experts can tell us about investing and what have you. But there's some issues I think we need to address with that. The first one is this here. This is from many Americans who can't afford a $400 emergency blame debt from CNBC.com. It says, the statistic is used to show how unequal things have become in the U.S. Some 40% of Americans would struggle to come up with even $400 to pay for an unexpected bill if, or more likely when, they're confronted with such an expense. They probably have to sell something or go into debt. The now off-cited figure comes from the Federal Reserve's 2018 survey of household economics and decision-making, in which some 12,000 households were asked about their financial well-being. Just how have so many Americans become so short on cash? Anki Chen at the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College recently tried to answer this question, where she says, if that many people can't cover a very small unexpected expense, how can we expect them to save for retirement? Chen said, explaining the center's interest in the bleak finding. So the reason I bring this up is to show if people can't, if this many people cannot afford a $400 unexpected expense or emergency expense, what money are they going to scrape together to invest in the stock market? All right, I need someone in the chat, one of these financial experts, if you're watching, tell me how that make it make sense for me. Okay, let's move on. I'm not done with this question yet. Let's move on to the next slide. New York University professor Edward Wolf tracks wealth in America, and this is being blocked. I can't see what it says there. That even though almost half of all households own shares either directly or indirectly, the richest 10% of households controlled 84% of the total value of these stocks in 2016. And this is from an article entitled "Most Americans Don't Have a Stake in the Stock Market" from Forbes.com. Okay, so what is this saying? It says the richest 10% of Americans' households control 84%. So that's the richest 10%. What about the richest 25%? I'm pretty sure it would be overwhelmingly the majority of the stocks available are controlled by the richest 25 to 30% of households. That leaves everything else for us to try to scrape together and invest in. Third point, though free marketeers, this is from InTheseTimes.com, the disconnect between the stock market and the real economy is destroying our lives. Though free marketeers like to boost the fact that more than half of Americans now own stock, the fact is that most of them own too few stocks to matter in their day-to-day economic lives. So what is that saying? Your E-Trade account, your Stash account, your Robinhood account, it don't matter in the bigger picture. It doesn't mean anything in the bigger picture. Okay? What that financial literacy expert is selling to you about taking the few little coins that you have and investing it in the stock market is ultimately meaningless in the bigger scheme of things. Let's continue. Half of all stocks, let's go back. Sorry. Half of all stocks in America are owned by the wealthiest 1% of people. They are the stock market's target audience and prime movers. the richest 1%, like the previous slide, the wealthiest 10%, right? Robert Scott, a senior economist at the Economic Policy Institute, says the stock market at the moment is being held up by, quote, frankly, just financial engineering. He estimates that by the time the government's rescue packages are all tallied up, they could add up to $5 trillion of zero interest loans to big business. Hardly the fabled laissez-faire version of capitalism, but of course the companies will take it. It is, after all, what their political contributions have paid for. Scott believes that the gravity of America's crushed economy will eventually pull down the stock market again, but the current measures will have served their purpose. Quote, insiders are going to sell off their stock and make a killing, he says, but the long-term investors will take the loss. So what does he talk? He's talking about the volatility of the stock market, okay? And how right now the stock market is being propped up by government money, okay? But eventually the stock market is going to collapse. Those people who are of the richest 1%, the richest 10% will be fine. And those of us who have 401ks, who have other, investments tied up in the stock market, will take the brunt of the punishment. We'll take the biggest loss. Okay. Those wealthy people have a cushion. We don't. So we're going to suffer. All right. Do lottery winners go broke 3 to 5 years after winning? So this is a common trope that we hear quite often from financial literacy so-called experts. Well, you have to be able to deal with your money, because you're people win the lottery, go broke 3 to 5 years later. So even if you have a lot of money, if you don't know how to manage it, you're gonna lose it all, right? So I was at a loss, because people say this over and over and over and over again, but they never tell you where that statistic comes from. So this from the Washington Post, and from, I got in, to a back and forth with one legal scholar, one well-known legal scholar who is teaching this in her classroom. And I asked her where she got this from. And, after more prodding, she finally sent me the article that you see here. I took some screenshots and cut it out. The ticket to Easy Street, the financial consequences of winning the lottery. Okay. And I would recommend anyone read this. So I've read it. It's got a lot of technical jargon, and I went through it and parsed through it as well as I could. But one thing I found quite striking. So if you look over to the right of the screen, you see the table there, table number 1. Winners linked to bankruptcy, lottery players, linked to bankruptcy petitions. Okay. All right. So it has here winners linked to bankruptcy 0 to 2 years after winning. Winners linked to bankruptcy 3 to 5 years after winning, and winners linked to bankruptcy 5 years after winning. Okay. And the screen is kind of small, so I'm kind of squinting my eyes to look here. So in all, for this study, and number one, keep in mind, this study was done in Florida. So this is one state, right? So, and they studied the Fantasy 5 winners, okay? And they said, and the study was based on how many of those Fantasy 5 winners for a certain amount of time went bankrupt 3 to 5 years after they won the lottery. So there are different levels of winning Fantasy 5. You could win like $1,500, anywhere from $1,500 to like 100,000 or so, okay, to 150,000. So this table tells us, and this table is in the report now. This table is in the paper, of the over 34,000 people who won the lottery in the Fantasy 5, 1,934 went bankrupt. But wait a minute. All this time we have been told that people, quote, people who win the lottery go broke 3 to 5 years later. That's not what this says. And anyone who reads this will understand that that's not what this says. This says that out of the over 30,000 people won the lottery, roughly 2,000 went bankrupt. That's far different from people who win the lottery 3 to 5 years later end up going broke. So I need you all to understand, like when people pass around information or pass around statistics, you really have to ask them where they're getting this stuff from, where they're getting this information from. And most of the times they don't know. They hear someone else say it in a lecture or in a talk, and it sounds good. It's a good way to beat up on poor people. So let me regurgitate it. And a lot of even these financial experts don't vet this information. They don't try to research the information to see if it's valid. They don't try to read the data to fact check this stuff. They just go off and regurgitate it because they heard someone else say it. Okay? We're being told that lottery winners go broke 3 to 5 years later. Okay? That the paper here is clear that that is not what that says. That is not what the paper says, and that is not simply not the case. Okay, so whenever someone runs this game on you, oh well, lottery winners go broke 3 to 5 years later. You now have the information to let them know that they're full of crap. Okay, let's move on. We're not done with this point yet. So another often cited statistic is that 70% of lottery winners go broke. This goes back to the lottery winners going broke narrative. And without fail, in the media, in the commentariat, the commentators that you see on TV, they all go back to the National Endowment for Financial Education as the source for that statistic. 70% of lottery winners go broke. Well, let's see what the National Endowment for Financial Education has to say about this point. So it's the writing is too small, so I'm going to read it from my tablet. Okay, but you can see the title there. You can find this yourself. Research statistics on financial windfalls and bankruptcy. This is their statement on the 70% of lottery winners going broke. It says, and I quote, "Over the past couple of years, several news organizations have attributed a statistic to the National Endowment for Financial Education, stating that 70% of lottery winners end up bankrupt just a few years after receiving a large financial windfall. This statistic is not backed by research from the NEFE, nor can it be confirmed by the organization. Frequent reporting without validation to NEFE has allowed this stat," and they put stat in quotation marks, "to survive online in perpetuity. In 2001, NEFE conducted a think tank of experts from several industries, including psychology, financial planning, and other fields, to discuss life-changing events and the psychology around them, where it is believed that a participant stated the 70% statistic. This statement was made independently and without verification from the NEFE." So all these folks, and that's the end of the statement. So all these folks are saying that 70% of lottery winners go broke, and they use that again. They use the relevance here is that they use statistics like this to shore up and sell financial literacy to working class people. So can we go back real quick? Just go back really quickly. I'm sorry. Okay, so but everyone's citing it from the National Endowment for Financial Education. They said we didn't come up with that. Okay, we cannot verify that. We didn't say that. Okay, so all right, next slide. Okay, corporate sponsorship of financial literacy education. Okay, so to the left of the screen here, you find a fella. I've never heard of this fella before. His name is Ross Mack, and he's been doing these kind of vignettes, if you will, about financial literacy and the power of the black dollar. And we're going to deconstruct that and take a broader look at that, especially what he has up there in the lifespan of the dollar in the different ethnic communities, the circulation of black dollars, Asian dollars, and I can't see the other one. I think Jewish dollars or something like that. We're going to come back to that. But the reason I posted this up here, I want you to look at the bottom, presented by Target. And when I first saw this, I found it quite interesting. We're having all of these companies and corporations backing financial literacy in the black community. And for me, I believe that it's a form of counterinsurgency measure, okay? Because it shouldn't be lost on anyone that Target is now throwing their money behind this Ross Mack character to do these vignettes about financial literacy, and that's how we're going to get equality. Target is the same company or same corporation that had bricks thrown through their windows in Minneapolis in response to George Floyd. It says here, Target, to the right, from the Business Insider, Target is closing down 24 stores in Minnesota until further notice amid looting and protests following the death of George Floyd. Okay, so Target, which is one of the many corporations, one of the plethora of corporations that have been complicit among the ruling class of stripping the wealth from the working class and the masses, including the black masses, are now going to come back and say, this is the way you all are going to have financial freedom. This is the way that you're going to have, liberation, is by learning about the power of the black dollar. And they're doing that to keep people who are in the midst of a rebellion from looting their stores and reappropriating that property and giving it back to the people. I don't really call it looting. Let's stay away from words like looting. Okay, they don't want any bricks. They don't want any more bricks thrown through their store windows, and that's why they're putting their money behind this foolishness about financial literacy and all this other crap. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, another person, Angel Rich, who I believe has an app that teaches you how to budget or be a better financial manager of your money or whatever. At the bottom, under the picture there, it says $10,000 grant from J.P. Morgan Chase for being the, quote, best solution in the world for reducing poverty. That's a big time statement. That came from Forbes magazine. And number one, off the bat, if it's the best solution for reducing reducing poverty, the best solution in the world for reducing poverty, they didn't even think enough about this sister to give her more than $10,000. A little pissy, nothing $10,000 grant for the best solution in the world for poverty. You have to understand, there's no way they can believe that's true. There is no way they can believe that statement is true if all they gave this sister was $10,000. Okay, but see, you have to understand, this is more marketing and this is more public relations on the part of J.P. Morgan Chase than anything else. Why is that? Let's look to the writing on the right of the screen. This is from Atlanta Black Star in 2015. J.P. Morgan Chase and Company has been accused of discriminatory practices by both the city of Miami and the city of Los Angeles after it was revealed that the nation's largest bank pushed Black and Hispanic borrowers toward risky home loan products. Those subprime loans are among those risky products that I'm talking about. These practices eventually resulted in, quote, a foreclosure wave that hammered property values and city coffers, the Los Angeles Times reported. The lawsuits also insisted that J.P. Morgan has a history of discriminatory practices and, quote, has engaged in a continuous pattern and practice of mortgage discrimination in both of those major cities since 2004. The lawsuit also slammed the bank for refusing to offer mortgage refinance and loan modifications to black borrowers. Okay, so with all of the racist things that the racist and discriminatory practices that they've been engaging in, not only in their financial products, but also, they got representatives of JP Morgan Chase on tape diminishing and degrading black customers. You have one lawsuit taking place. I don't know if it's been settled or not, but you have one lawsuit from a former senior black representative of Chase Bank, alleging that there was widespread discrimination within the ranks, where black employees were only able to go so high within the company. Okay, so with all this going on, and with Jamie Dimon's complicity in the racist practices inside and outside, them giving a little, pissy $10,000 to this black sister for this financial literacy app, and they're saying that it's going to cure black poverty. And they're saying, a black poverty, keep in mind that they have been complicit in contributing to, is smacks of, being disingenuous. And again, this is more of a PR thing than anything else. Okay, so this next slide, there's supposed to be a video here. I'm not seeing. Okay, cool. Can we? So this is, while we're pulling it up, this is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. And I want everyone to look at this. This is from the Washington Post. And this also, that to come along with this is a challenge to any financial literacy experts in the chat right now who are watching this. This is a challenge to you. Let's look at this video. Let's look at this video real quick. I'm not able to hear it. Can you all hear that? I'm not able to hear it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Geechee, but I can't hear the video. Do I need to be muted?
I can hear you. All right, let me try it again.
Okay. Let me mute myself and see what happens.
Hey, can you hear me on the video? All right, let me try something. I don't know why it's not.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't. I don't think Ivan just said that they're not able to hear it either.
Well, man, you got JP Morgan shutting down your video now.
Maybe so. I think that's what's happening now. Okay, so we'll probably need to just skip over that. Yeah, we'll need to skip over that. We'll just need to move on.
Say something, cause
Testing. Mic check 1 2 1 2.
I feel like I don't even hear it.
Again, one of the risks you take when you go live, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Yeah, we can skip it. We can skip it. Let's just let's go back to the presentation screen. I'll do my best to explain what's going on.
So we might have to skip that video. I'm not sure why it's not playing.
That's fine. We can skip it. Go back to the presentation screen. So while Geechee's setting the screen back up, I'll just explain to you what the video was talking about. So that's Representative Katie Porter, who was grilling the CEO of Chase, JP Morgan Chase. And what essentially she does is lay out a budget for a single mother with an entry-level position at the Chase Bank. And she writes, she breaks everything down to what she has to pay for. She's not wasting this hypothetical single mother is not wasting any money. Everything is at the lowest that it can be as far as of how much is being spent on, like, rent and all like that. And at the end of the month, she has this hypothetical single mother has a shortfall, a budgetary shortfall of $500. And she asked Jamie Dimon, how does she overcome that monthly shortfall of $500? Now, the easy answer would have been for the CEO of JP Morgan and Chase to say, okay, well, we just need to pay her more money. But he couldn't possibly even fathom paying an entry-level worker more money. So he was just kind of stumbling and fumbling, and he just said he didn't know. I don't know. He just said he did not know how to help this woman overcome a budgetary shortfall of $500 monthly. So the reason I bring this up is because I want any financial literacy expert who is watching this or who will watch this to watch this video. Again, it's Katie Porter. I don't know the exact, I mean, you can find it on YouTube anywhere, but it's Katie Porter questioning Jamie Dimon. And I want you all, any financial literacy expert or budget expert or whoever, to you did that? Or any expert or financial literacy expert or whoever to look at this video and you tell me how that's supposed to, how she's supposed, how this single mother is supposed to make that budget work. Okay. So that's my challenge. You tell me the how. Let's see if you know better than the CEO of a $3 trillion bank. Okay, as far as how to make this money stretch, this single mother's money stretch. Okay, so that's my challenge. Let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we're going back to the circulation of ethnic dollars, circulation of the black dollar, fact or fiction. So we saw this on the Ross Mack video that he was doing. Lifespan of $1. Asian community, 28 days. Jewish community, 19 days. Black community, 6 hours. Oh, it's shocking. Wow. You mean to tell me that the Black community's dollars only circulate in the community for 6 hours, while Asians and Jewish dollars circulate in their communities for several days? Wow. But let's look at the source for that. The source, and they have it in real small print at the bottom. Brooke Stevens, Talking Dollars and Making Sense. Okay. But let's see where she gets that data from. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see if this circulation of Black and Asian and Jewish dollars is fact or fiction. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So this article here to the left of the screen is from and Geechee really this article blew my mind when Geechee showed it to me. Truth be told, now this is, from my understanding, a collective of students at Howard University who kind of do reporting and kind of take on these just different myths and tackling these different myths that are spread in the Black community. I'm being notified just now that there's a slight delay. I'm sorry, folks. So I want us to take a look at this. I want us to take a look at this article. It's from truthbetold.com. So if we could pull this article up. So I hope everyone can see that. So the title of the article, go back up a little bit. Does a dollar spent in the Black community really stay there for only 6 hours? Okay. And I want to resist the temptation of reading the entire article. Go down. I want to resist the temptation of reading the entire article, but I feel I may have to read at least a sizable part of this to get the real point, for everyone to get the real point. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, yeah, that's good. This is, and we'll go down as we're reading. 2 weeks ago. Okay, so I'll kind of skip around here. The lifespan of a dollar in the Asian community is 28 days. The Jewish community, the lifespan of a dollar is 19 days. And the lifespan in the African American community is approximately 6 hours. Roland Martin said during his news talk show on the Black-owned cable network TV1. So this is a kind of old article. This is when Martin was still with TV1. And Maggie Anderson, she agrees and all like that. Anderson, a proponent of Black spending more with Black-owned businesses, has often used the 6-hour figure in a series of talks around the country. And in her book, she uses the figure to argue that African Americans need to do more to support Black-owned businesses. Okay. The figures, and I'm skipping around. The figures have been attributed to various sources, including the NAACP and the Selig Center for Economic Growth at the University of Georgia. But does the dollar spent by Black people really stay in the community for only 6 hours? The facts. To fact check the statistic, truthbetold.news tried to track down the source of this widely cited figure. Several federal government agencies produce data on Black spending patterns. The Federal Reserve Bank publishes a survey of consumer finances that contains information on consumer spending patterns, but it does not contain the level of detail that would show how often a dollar would circulate in a given community. The Bureau of Labor Statistics also produces reports on Black spending patterns, but this data also does not show how often money circulates within the neighborhood. Other agencies like the Small Business Administration keep track of Black businesses, but the SBA also does not compile figures that would allow a comparison of how often money circulates within the community. Private research organizations such as Nielsen and the Chicago-based Target Market News also track Black spending patterns. The available data shows that 43 or 4.3 million Blacks in the United States, 4.3, I'm assuming, Blacks in the United States, well, 43, yeah, have about 1.1 trillion in spending power. Now let's stop there. That's also not true. So even as Truth Be Told .news is trying to dispel myths, that 1.1 trillion in spending power is also not true. Okay, and Dr. Jared Ball has demonstrated quite thoroughly how that's not true. So let's move on. But Truth Be Told News .news was unable to locate any agencies or private research firms with data that show how long money circulates within a community. Truth Be Told .news also asked for the source of the 6-hour time frame mentioned in the NAACP website in an article posted on September 24th, 2012. In an email, Nicole Kinney, the writer of the NAACP article, said that she used several sources, including Maggie Anderson's 2012 book and data from Nielsen and the Minority Business and Development Agency. Truth Be Told also contacted the Selig Center about the figures attributed to the Economic Research Unit. Money circulates 0 to 1 time within the Black community compared to more than 6 times it circulates in the Latino community, 9 times in the Asian community, and unlimited amounts within the white community. In an email, Jeffrey Humphreys, director of the center, said, "I've never heard that. It's not from our center, and it does not sound accurate, but I've got no idea what the actual numbers are." So he's saying that he has no idea where these numbers are coming from. The data appears to have been first used in the book by Brooke Stevens, a financial planner, the book Talking Dollars and Making Sense. That's where Ross Mack got this from. A Wealth Building Guide for African Americans was written in 1996 and cites the 6-hour figure on page 18 of the book. There is no reference to the original source of the data or the study. Stevens attributes the data to a John Ray, who is described as economic development specialist in Washington. There is no other mention of Ray or the study in the book. Truth Be Told .news reached out to Stevens, who lives in Brooklyn, New York, for more information about Ray and the study. In an interview, Stevens said Ray and a co-author, Lee Green, did the study over a 6-month period in 1992, possibly through a nonprofit organization that might no longer exist. She did not remember the name of the report and could not provide any information about Ray or Green beyond saying that Ray might have taught at Howard University in 1993. The Human Resource Office at Howard said it could not find a reference to Jim or John Ray. In addition, Truth Be Told .news was unable to locate Lee Green or any studies co-authored by him. There was no media coverage of the study that can be found in the LexisNexis research database, and the only reference to the study appears to be in Stevens' book. Truth Be Told also reached out to Maggie Anderson to see if she remembered the name of the study or could provide the information about Ray. She says, "I know Brooke Stevens. I know about the statistic," Anderson said. "I did run into her phenomenal research and the study about economic lifespan of $1 in different ethnic groups." Anderson attributes the 6-hour figure to Our Black Year to Brooke Stevens' book. "I published her findings in my book, Our Black Year, and I refer to it whenever I speak and interview. I have been promoting that 6-hour statistic quite heavily over the past 6 years." Okay. She continues to say how it is the foundation of her work and research commissioned for her year-long empowerment experiment through Stephen Rogers, a professor at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Our Kellogg study, blah, 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 about the 1 trillion myth. Okay, we can, if there's a question about the 1.1 trillion myth, we can come back to that. Let's going further. Anderson said the study also found that if the middle class Black consumers spent a little more, 7% more, just 10% of their spending with Black firms and the mainstream firms that engage them, we can create almost 1 million jobs. She also includes the 6-hour figure at the Kellogg findings in an essay in the National Urban League's 2014 State of Black America report. Brooks Stevens' statistic about the 6 hours shows why we need to do more to support our businesses and reverse the exploitation of our consumers and the socioeconomic crises our neighborhoods endure, Anderson said. So we're having a lot of this is being perpetuated and made pervasive all throughout the discourse about Black spending. But no one can really put a finger on where it actually came from. Okay? So, truth be told, also reached out to other Black economic development advocates who have cited the figure, and while many of them had heard of the numbers, not one had actually seen the study that produced them. I've been trying to kill this thing for years, said Ken Smichael, president of Target Market News, a Chicago-based research firm that tracks Black spending patterns. It's just not true. Okay. Smichael, who has produced an annual report called The Buying Power of Black America, rather, for nearly 2 decades, disputes the notion that the circulation of money can be tracked in a community. There is no scientific way to do that, Smichael said. I mean, how would you do it? Economists contacted by truthbetold.news to review the figure agree. It's what I consider an urban myth, said William Spriggs, a former Labor Department official in the Obama administration, who is now chief economist at the AFL-CIO union. Spriggs also teaches economics at Howard University. Spriggs said a red flag for him was the mention of dollars circulating in the Jewish community for 19 days. What he says, what makes me suspicious is that it has economic data based on religion when the federal government doesn't collect any information by religion, Spriggs says. Where would you get that from? He goes further. When you say Asian communities, you're talking about a very diverse population that includes Indians, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and they are all different and not a monolithic community. It would be a mistake to try to include all these different people under one umbrella to talk about spending in communities, he said. He added, and even if you surveyed consumers about their spending with business, how would you know the religion of the person who owned the business? If I shop at Macy's, I don't know the religion of the person who owns it. Justin Wolfers, an economics professor at the University of Michigan, cited other problems with the figures used by Stevens and others. First, there is no clear definition of community. Are we talking about specific neighborhoods or as a whole? Wolfers asked. Secondly, he points out, like Spriggs, that the federal government does not collect economic information by religion, nor does it collect hourly economic activity. Quote, it seems highly improbable that you could get this data the way it's described, Wolfers said. The inclusion of religion's data alone makes me question the figures. Let's go further down, PG. Okay. The claim that a dollar circulates in the Black community for only 6 hours cannot be substantiated. The federal government does not produce data that would allow such a comparison. In addition, economists contacted by truthbetold.news said some of the data cited, such as information about dollars circulating in the Jewish community, is questionable because the federal government does not collect information by religion, and researchers would be unable to get the information accurately from a survey of consumers. The earliest source of the statistic appears to be a book that is nearly 20 years old. The book also never mentions the name of the study, nor provides any information about the author. Okay. I understand where people who use this figure are coming from, and I don't want to downplay the issue, but you don't solve the problem by using questionable data, said Spriggs, the Howard economist. Okay. So that was a lot there. I felt like I had to read at least most of the article so everyone who sees this will get the point. Okay. We're citing this data and we have no idea where this information is coming from. Apparently the person, the oldest source for this information, and certainly a source that Ross Mack thinks is legitimate, is Miss Stevens, Brooke Stevens, in that book. But even she it's not clear on where the information came from. You know, she writes it in the book, and she doesn't even follow basic research or citation guidelines of citing the source where that information came from. Okay, so it's the data about the 6 hours for the circulation of the black dollar is just not there. The information is not available to ensure that that's true information. So what I would recommend, based on this article, is that we stop using that information. We stop saying that. It's a good talking point. Oh, a dollar only circulates in the black community for 6 hours. It has a little bit of a shock value to it. It gives a little shock value for the listeners and an audience during a speech. But is it true? And according to this article, and according to the experts that they interviewed for the article, it's not true. It's a myth. It's not real. Okay? But hold on one second. I'm not even done with this yet. Is it true? We know it's probably not true. More than likely it's not true. But even if it were true, let's say that where you see the circulation of the different dollars, and they said the Asian dollar circulates in the Asian community for 28 days. Even if it were true, does it matter? Even if it was absolutely verifiable that these dollars circulate that for that time period in the different communities, does the circulation of those dollars automatically lead to a net benefit for the entire community? Let's look over to the writing here on the right of the screen. Asian dollars circulate for 28 days, but this is from the Urban Institute. Despite assumptions that all Asian Americans are high earners, 12.3% of Asian Americans live below the federal poverty level, ranking from 6.8% of Filipino Americans to 39.4% of Burmese Americans. So nearly 40% of Burmese Americans live below the poverty line. Now, from Filipino to Burmese and all points in between, all those are Asians. All those would be considered Asians, right? Almost 20% of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders live in poverty. In 2014, Asian Americans represent 17.9% of the people living in poverty in New York City and had the highest poverty rate of any racial or ethnic group at 29%. According to New York City, the NYC Opportunity tabulations provided to the Urban Institute researchers. 29%. So if you're telling me that the Asian dollar circulates in that community for 28 days, apparently it doesn't matter. Even if it were true, it doesn't matter. It's not a benefit for the entire Asian community. It's not a benefit. And if you go to many of these Chinatowns, you'll see stark class differences where even with the small amount of money that they have, or even the money that they have is being hoarded by a small elite in Chinatown, while the rest of the Chinese people are living in impoverished or are going around wealthless. So even if it were true, what damn good is the circulation of a dollar in the community? It apparently doesn't have any benefit for the masses of the people in that community, even if it were true. Okay, so we're wrapping up. We're almost done, I promise. So I wanted to focus on this idea of begging the white man. We hear this so much in our Black consciousness circles. Oh, when you demand policy, when you say that policy matters, and you try to, hold the government accountable for, what is taken from Black people, you're begging the white man. Let's see what Dr. Amos Wilson has to say about this. He says, and this is from one of his lectures, he says the following: African Americans should be the first in line to get from America. Why do I say so? Is it because I'm immoral? No, it's because we paid the price. We paid the price for the hundreds of years of slavery in this country. We paid the price of Jim Crowism. We paid the price of lynching. We paid the price of injustice. We paid the price of police brutality. We paid the price of unemployment. We paid the price of ignorance and miseducation. We paid the price with our blood on every theater of battle this country has ever entered into. We fought in the Revolutionary War. We fought in the Civil War. We fought the Spanish-American War. We fought the Indian Wars. We fought in Korea. We fought in Japan. We fought all over this earth. And consequently, it is a bill that has come due that we get paid from America. And it is a shame that there are those in America who say, after all these sacrifices, that African Americans act as if they just got off the boat yesterday. Why don't you act like the other immigrants? We are not the other immigrants. And that's a quote from Dr. Amos Wilson. With everything that Black people have done for this country, and the stripping of our wealth, the massive amount of stripping of our wealth, the things that have been taken from us throughout the history of our time in this country, the demand from America to give us at least some of that money back is a just and legitimate demand. It's not begging the white man, it's demanding that we get back what was taken from us. And we need to do it by any means necessary. Okay. Another point that I didn't put in the slide that just occurred to me, we like to think that that Black people don't pay any taxes. But Black people pay taxes, and we contribute to this system. Can you go back to the previous slide, Geechee? Sorry. Maybe I'm being long-winded. That's Geechee's way of telling me to speed it up. But if we could go back to the previous slide. But we pay taxes just like every other group in this country. And the gall of some people that when we go back to this government that we've invested so much money into through our taxes and demand at least a pittance of that money back. Oh, you're begging the white man. They're begging the white man. No, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay. You need to stay out of the conversation. Okay. It's not begging the white man. It's demanding and getting back from this government what we've given to it historically, what was taken from us historically, and what we give into it voluntarily, contributed to it voluntarily through our taxes. So please do us all a favor, people who say that, and shut the hell up. Okay. Let's all right. Now we go to the next slide. Okay, so what I want to do for the next couple of slides here is point out that, and I've talked about this before in a previous presentation, but I think it's I think it's important that we go back to the goals and demands of at least a handful of our notable Black organizations, and what they were asking for. So look at the 10-point program and platform for the Black Panther Party. It says, we want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every man employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that if the white American businessmen will not give full employment, then the means of production should be taken from the businessmen and placed in the community so that the people of the community can organize and employ all of its people and give a high standard of living. We want to end the robbery by the capitalists of our Black community. We believe that this racist government has robbed us, and we are now demanding the overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. 40 acres and 2 mules were promised 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and mass murder of Black people. We will accept the payment in currency, which will be distributed to our many communities. The Germans are now aiding the Jews in Israel for the genocide of the Jewish people. The Germans murdered 6 million Jews. The American racist has taken part in the slaughter of over 50 million Black people. Therefore, we feel this is a modest demand that we make. So when they came up with the 10-point program and platform, I'm talking about the Black Panther Party, and they said this is a just demand. Were they begging the white man? And yes, they had the survival programs like the free breakfast for children and the food drives and the sickle cell anemia testing and the clinics and what have you. And that's fine. No one is suggesting that we shouldn't do that if we have the capability. But after a while, there has to be an accountability from this government to get back what was taken from us. Okay, and that could be in the form of direct payments or in the form of policy that's geared toward reducing the impoverishment of Black people. The Muslim program, okay? We want our people in America whose parents and grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of their own, either on this continent or elsewhere. We believe, keep in mind, I want you to listen to the second part. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to provide such land that the area must be fertile and minerally rich. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to maintain and supply our needs in the separate territory for the next 20 to 25 years until we are able to produce and supply our own needs. That was the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. This is still their program. This is still number 4 in their program. Are they begging the white man? With all the nation building projects that they do and the things that the businesses and whatever and institutions that they've created, even they realize the need that there must be some redress from this government. Okay? Malcolm X's organization, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, OAAU, it says in their program, in their platform, the Organization of Afro-American Unity will take those private steps that are necessary to ensure the survival of the Afro-American people in the face of racist aggression and the defense of our women and children. We are within our rights to see to it that the Afro-American people who fulfill their obligations to the United States government, in parentheses, we pay taxes and serve in the armed forces of this country like American citizens do, also expect from this government the obligation that it owes us as a people, or extract these obligations ourselves. Needless to say, among this number, we include protection of certain inalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's Malcolm X's organization. Was Malcolm X begging the white man? Was John Henrik Clarke, who helped Malcolm X come up with this charter for their organization, was he signing on to begging the white man? Is it begging the white man when they ask for it? Okay, next slide. Okay, the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Poor People's Campaign, and their Economic Bill of Rights. Okay, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, architects of the Poor People's Campaign, have outlined 5 requirements of the Bill of Economic and Social Rights that will set poverty on the road to extinction. 1, a meaningful job at a living wage for every employable citizen. 2, a secure and adequate income for all who cannot find jobs or for whom employment is inappropriate. 3, access to land as a means of income and livelihood. 4, access to capital as a means of full participation in the economic life of America. 5, recognition by law of the rights of people affected by government programs to play a truly significant role in determining how they are designed and carried out. Okay, so SCLC, they're quite in line with this idea of demanding redress from the government. Okay, so all these organizations, I think we did about 4 so far. So there's the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, the OAAU, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. They're all saying that there must be redress from this government in the form of either policy or actual cash payment to repair the damage that had been done from the wealth stripping that has taken place over all these years. Okay, so let's talk about solutions real quick. We're almost done. We're wrapping up here. Changes in individual behavior will not close the racial wealth gap. Only structural systemic policy change can do that. Adjustments in Black and Latinx education rates, home ownership, savings, and employment do not greatly reduce the racial wealth divide due to the structural underpinnings holding the racial wealth divide in place. And that's from the previous report. This is from a report called 10 Solutions for Closing the Racial Wealth Gap. Okay. So it's saying individual behavior, changing up our individual behavior, including financial literacy. None of that's going to work. The only way that this is going to work is through policy. So that's what this is saying. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, now this is from the previous report. Addressing racial wealth inequality will require major redistributive effort or another major public policy intervention to build Black American wealth. This could take the form of direct race-specific initiatives, like a dramatic reparations program tied to compensation for the legacies of slavery and Jim Crow, and or an initiative that addresses the perniciousness of wealth inequality for the entire American population, which would disproportionately benefit Black Americans due to their exceptionally low levels of wealth. Indeed, the 2 strategies, reparations for America's record of racial injustice or the provision of the equivalent of a substantial trust for every wealth-poor American, need not be mutually exclusive. So I want you to keep that in mind, okay? So there's the reparations piece, and then another piece where there's money being distributed to every American, okay? Let's move to the next slide. Okay, so the first aspect of that, I have 2 books here, The Black Tax by Sean Rochester, and From Here to Equality, Reparations and for Black Americans in the 21st Century by Dr. William Darity. Okay, so the reason I post these books up here is because the Black Tax the book informs us that from slavery until the present day, Black people in this country have been robbed of nearly $70 trillion. Okay, that is the estimate of wealth that has been taken from Black people from slavery up until today. And no wealth development effort for the Black community could ever take place without that money being given back to us, without at least some of that money being given back to us. Okay, it's not going to be possible no matter how how financially literate that we are, to take the pennies and dimes that we happen to have left in our pockets to build what we need to build. Okay. Now, that's not saying that that's not saying that it is impossible to build independent institutions to the extent that we are able to. I'm not saying that, but any nation building or wealth development effort must include us getting that money back, or at least some of that money back. And that can only happen through public policy. Okay. And, the reason I post Dr. Darity's book is because this is the definitive study about how that would look, how a reparations plan would look. So I would encourage, this will probably be one of the books that we'll read in the future for our Barter and Build think tanks book club meetings. Okay, so when we do that, we'll post it and we'll advertise that. And we need to study this book, and we'll, going to discuss it and because he lays it out from beginning to end, how this reparations program would work, and how it's well within the capability of this government to make it happen. Okay, so reparations, another point on reparations, and this is from William Darity and his partner Kristen Mullen, Dr. Kristen Mullen, excuse me. This is an article titled Black Reparations and the Racial Wealth Gap from the Brookings Institution. He says, therefore, as we argue in From Here to Equality, erasure of the racial wealth disparity must be a core objective of reparations for the Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. We estimate at minimum, this will require $10 to $12 trillion in federal expenditures. Reparations will not solve all problems that confront Black Americans. For example, the recent national and international wave of protests against anti-Black police violence triggered by the highly visible execution of an unarmed and prostrate George Floyd brings to the fore a seemingly eternal problem of atrocities associated with law enforcement practices. Reparations payments alone are unlikely automatically to alter those practices. However, an $800,000 increase in net worth per Black household could have a dramatic impact on Black health outcomes, home ownership, education, economic security, and more. Okay, so that's Dr. William Darity speaking about reparations. Let's go to the next slide. I think this is this next slide should be the last slide. All right, so the next part, so at the beginning of the solutions segment, we talked about the two aspects, the reparations for what happened to Black people, and then a more broader effort to redistribute the wealth for the Americans who are wealthless or who are struggling financially. So we talked about the reparations, and this second part is the baby bonds, which would address the second aspect that they're talking about. So this is from Lynn Paramore, the Institute for New Economic Thinking. This is from an article that she wrote. And this baby bonds is an idea that was developed by William Darity, who we just previously mentioned, and also Derek Hamilton, who we mentioned earlier in the presentation. So baby bonds, in Hamilton's formulation, would be funded directly out of Treasury and held in an account by the federal government, similar to Social Security. An amount a child receives would depend on the wealth position into which she is born. If she's the offspring of Oprah Winfrey or Bill Gates, she might get $500, but upwards of $50,000 if she's born to the lowest rung of the economic ladder. The average amount for a child would be around $20,000. Accounts would be guaranteed a nominal 1.5% rate of return, and the payout would not take place until the child becomes an adult. At that time, you get to spend the money, but not just on anything. The funds would have to be used for a clearly defined asset enhancing activity like financing a debt-free education, purchasing a business, or buying a home. So that's the second aspect, the baby bonds. Okay. And as we talk further in our discussions with our bARTer&Build think tank, we're actually going to go dig deeper into the baby bonds aspect. I think it's a magnificent program, and it's doable. It's something that this government could pay for. Okay, so I think that's the last slide. So I'm open to any questions or challenges. Geechee, you gonna come up here with me? Don't leave me out here hanging by myself, man. So I want to be clear. This presentation was meant to be a challenge, an open challenge to the financial literacy experts. So I don't know, the people who are still watching that. Thank you for sticking with us, even with our technical difficulties. I want to channel my inner Norman Finkelstein and give my detractors priority as far as any questions that they have, or any people who would object to what we just talked about, the presentation I just made. I want to give them priority as far as any questions or objections that they have to what we just talked about. And also, what we're also going to do, because it's my understanding that there's also a delay going on. What we're also planning to do is we're going to post this, and anyone who will have any objections or questions or observations we'll have a more formal discussion at a later time. Again, we had to move it up. It's unfair to you all who are watching this, and we apologize for that. But we had to move it up to, account or accommodate the conflicts and last minute conflicts in our schedule. Yeah.
I feel like I was talking all that time. So what's happening right now? I'm delayed, and I can't hear it on my computer, so I gotta hear it on my phone. So so it's weird. It's weird. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask this question, and then I'm gonna try to go out the broadcast and come back and see if that fix things. But earlier somebody was agreeing to your point, right? And sometimes when people agree to your point, they will agree, and then they will say something to show you that they don't agree, or they will say something to show you that they didn't quite understand. So when you was talking about the education and the financial literacy, and that's not going to change the fundamental problem, their response was, that's true. That sounds true, because education doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change behaviors. So that person, to me, I may be reading it wrong. That person, to me, believed that no, education will fix it. It's just the people's who get educated, it's their problem because their behaviors ain't getting better. So I need you to even clarify even deeper, right? Because again, somebody heard that you said financial literacy won't solve it. And instead of saying that, oh, that won't solve the structural problem, they're saying that, well, people can be educated, they still don't do the right thing. So that's, you see what I'm saying? So it's like, they're finding a way to twist it so that they can even say that, yeah, it is true.
Yeah, so we definitely have to go deeper on that, because we have to understand that, yes, the report says that financial literacy won't change behavior, but we have to understand why the behavior won't change. The behavior won't change because the behavior is that type of behavior or response is demanded by the structural factors that come into play. So you can have all of the financial education in the world, but if you have like we talked about with the Katie Porter question she posed to Jamie Dimon, if you have a $500 budgetary shortfall, no amount of financial education is going to make up for that budgetary shortfall. No amount of financial education is going to just out of nowhere, $500 just like that monthly. Okay, it's not going to happen. So even though that this hypothetical single mother may know all there is to know from working at a bank and working, and dealing with the money and dealing with budgets and stuff, even though she may have the education and the know-how how to manage money, if it's just not enough money, she's probably not going to have another choice but to take out a predatory title loan or a payday loan. Because it's either do that or borrow the money and go in debt by borrowing from someone that she knows, or or whatever. I mean, the knowledge in and of itself is just not enough. Okay, if she doesn't have the money to apply it correctly, right? So again, so there are structural factors that determine the application of financial literacy, the application of financial education or understanding of budget and money management. Okay. Let's see here. So, Brother Ivan, I think he asked a question. Let me just address that really quickly. What negative impacts do these Willie Lynch tactics of influencing blacks have on the movements black people are trying to mount? What negative impacts do these Willie Lynch tactics? Let me read the question again. What negative impacts do these Willie Lynch tactics of influencing blacks have on the movements black people are trying to mount? Well, the narrative. First of all, let me just really quickly address the Willie Lynch thing. I'm not one of the folks who I think Willie Lynch can be used as a cautionary tale, but the cautionary tale doesn't necessarily need to be factual or historically true. I don't think the Willie Lynch thing, I guess, the Willie Lynch letter or what have you, is necessarily true. But that doesn't mean the tactics that are often attributed to this character named Willie Lynch aren't being used. So let me just put that disclaimer in there. But again, there's this narrative that's being proliferated, this narrative that's being promulgated, rather, by even the most conscious among us, that somehow, some way, black people are at fault. That black people are the black deviants or black abnormality, or just blacks, as W.B. Du Bois said, black people being a problem people rather than a people with problems. That has to be the root of what's going on, of either the political stagnation or the economic malaise that we find ourselves in. And therefore, it becomes incumbent upon us to produce programs that fix black people, that black people with the mindset that black people somehow need to be fixed in order to have what we need as a people, or to seek black liberation or anything like that. I remember one brother who, and we, there's been a reconciliation, and this isn't a jab at the brother, but I remember one time. But one thing that he said is a very clear, almost paradigmatic point of example of the point I'm trying to make, where he said that he lives in Baltimore, and he said that the reason that we're in the situation we're in is because there are no strong black families in Baltimore. And I was astounded by him saying that, because there are over 140,000 black households in Baltimore. How could he possibly know that there are no strong black families in Baltimore? How could he possibly know that? and it amazes me, like the things that we're just taught to accept as being axiomatic and being true, and we don't vet these things, we don't fact check. As long as it's saying something negative about Black people, we accept it, because we have a kind of masochistic mindset. Like we have to beat up on ourselves. We have to beat ourselves down and kick other Black people while they're down. And I think Derek Hamilton said it, he made a great point. Like we other Black people, and it comes to a point where I say this all the time, Geechee, you know this, like you cannot base a solution off of a false premise. If the premise is false, the solution that you come up with to address that false premise is also going to fail, even if it's successful. Okay, so the example I used before, Larry. So if the issue is financial literacy, we're in the situation we're in because we don't have financial literacy. We can have all the financial literacy classes and programs that we could, to our heart's delight, our heart's desire. We can have a financial literacy program in every Black, majority Black city, in every Black neighborhood. And all of them, every last one of them can be successful. It's still not going to solve the problems, because the problems have nothing to do with whether you're financially literate or not. Okay? The people who come up with these financial literacy programs, they'll be lauded, they'll be uplifted, they'll be seen as someone who's creating solutions in our community, like this clown Ross Mack or the sister with the app. They'll be promoted and pushed out to the front. So they'll be successful, and their success legitimizes their program. Mm. So the fact that CNN and JP Morgan Chase are promoting this sister's financial literacy app, that legitimizes and validates the app.
Right.
Okay. But it doesn't, because it's validated in the eyes of the empire, in the eyes of the ruling class, doesn't mean it's going to end Black poverty.
So I want to stay in that room right quick. So I share stuff with you, you share stuff with me, we share stuff in the group of, and you shared this in your critique of the legal expert. I don't want to call people experts anymore, but people read articles, right? The article can be like contradicting what they're saying, and they'll find like 2 words in the article that agree with them. They'd be like, "See," and they post an article, and you're like, "Yo, did you read this article?" Like there's somebody who posted this article about the grit of Black businesses, and it showed that like 80% of people, 80 or 60% or 80% of the Black businesses in this area failed because of COVID, and only 20% white. Half of Black businesses lost all of their income, and only 20% white. This one business that saved, the only reason why she was able to be saved is because she had to dip into her retirement. And so it's like the article is mistitled, and it's reading the horrors of how inequality is. But the person shared the article, and like, so again, the legal scholar did it a little bit as well. But speak to this concept of like, we reading for confirmation and not even actually reading the articles and research and who and where it came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and you're right. And even with this particular elder, like if I mention her name, like everyone would know who she was. Like she's like a prominent legal scholar, and like for the when I first approached her, online, she was saying, oh yeah, well, people go broke 3 to 5 years after winning the lottery. And I asked her, like, where does that come from? And she tried to lean on her credentials to validate the point. Now, with people, often that becomes enough. But that wasn't enough for me. She said, well, I've been teaching this for 20 years and I'm a legal, law professor at such and such, university and what have you. And I've said, ma'am, I've been following your work for over 10 years. I know exactly who you are. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. And I still do, even though she was wrong on this one topic. But I know you didn't come up with these numbers. You didn't do this research. So I want to know where you got these numbers from. And she, finally showed me the article that I shared with you all about the ticket to Easy Street. That's the name of the article. And, I didn't want to hound her and keep on with it. She was kind of, done with the conversation. But I was just like floored. Like there's no, I don't see, she could not have read this article and made that conclusion. There's no way that she could have made that conclusion, like that people go broke 3 to 5 years after winning the lottery from reading that article. Okay. Because it doesn't say that. But to your broader point, even our most educated, even our most credentialed, even our most degreed, black folks, well, not black folks, but just folks in general, we tend to have a problem with fact checking sources and not doing the research and digging deeper into things, because again, it goes back to beating up on poor people. We have, as much as there is an anti-blackness that is pervasive in the society, I think the same can be said for anti-poor people. So anything, no matter how absurd, that beats up on poor people and beats up on black people, is just something that's spread. Even the Washington Post said, if you win the lottery, you're likely to go broke in 3 to 5 years. And then click here to find out more. And I clicked on it, and it was the same paper.
Right. Yeah. So I don't want people to mistake. We're saying that mistakes don't happen. It's just when the mistakes happen, how do you respond? Like I've shared things that I've read half-assed and be like, oh, and then going back and like, oh, damn, I didn't say that, right? Mm-hmm. There's a difference between like sharing it and then trying to stand on your square and like defend yourself, and then you like, you know what? I ain't never seen a study. Like, I remember a young brother came in there. We was literally having this conversation about this topic. We almost finished. He came in new and threw. He proved my point, but he threw the same trope out there. Well, the Jewish people, and I've seen it because I've worked in Jewish neighborhoods, and I'm like, well, where did you get that study from? He was like, he got quiet. I was like, well, you probably never. Like, there's really no way to track religious spending, and so where did you? He's like, and then we still waste money. Like it's kind of like we still. And so I'm glad you covered the and, right? Also, kind of speak to because Coleman Hughes says this trope about like that will be disrespectful to our ancestors because you could never that amount can never be quantified. Like that would be disrespectful. I don't even want the money, right? And other folks will say things like, well, we get the money, we'll just spend it back. Both of those are if you don't want to really dig, maybe legitimate excuses. You never can quantify it, true. And two, we probably will get the money back. But why is that so dumb to try to avoid what actually have to happen?
Well, I mean, it's number one, I'm not really like we demonstrated with the data in this presentation. Black people aren't just black people aren't given to wasting money or spending frivolously. So we may get that money and, hell, the majority of us may save it, or the majority of us may actually invest it in, asset building things like buying a house or paying off debt or starting a business or anything like that. So it's I'm not willing to accept that once we get the reparations, we're all just going to give it back to give it back to the white man or spend it frivolously or anything like that. You know, yeah. So I mean, it's a just demand, not only on, and I wouldn't even just limit it to an economic level, on a moral level, and I think a psychosocial level. It's a just demand. It's something that I think would be necessary to heal the wounds that have been made by racism in this country. Okay. Of course, it won't completely heal all wounds, but it's a start. That $12 trillion is a start. It's a down payment,
right,
on what needs to happen in this country.
So if you watch it from YouTube or Facebook, any questions before we wrap up from the study or just financial literacy in general? And by all means, the people who are re-watching on the watch party that we are having later on today, we're not live anymore, but you still can comment and debate as you will, especially if you are one of those financial literacy people. I hate to put y'all in a box because, as we see, there is a financial literacy person who don't agree with you. And I think that nuance is also missing in a lot of arguments, right? For instance, if we say something, we're going to look at all the economists that agree with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we're going to look at all the psychologists that agree with us. And it is true, there are economists and psychologists that don't agree with certain things. So that's why I think it's always beautiful and important to have ideological struggles and debate, not to try to kill each other, but like, yo, if you know some stuff and this person knows some stuff and it conflict, people should be able to see that, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when your source come from Wikipedia or a satire page, that's your ass. I like it. You know we can do about that. That's on you. But people need to see that, right? And so I think that's important for us to do that. Even though legitimate honest intentions of us, the system is predatory, so there will need to be built protections. Okay.
I agree with that, Ivan. I agree with that 100%. And even William Darity makes that point in his interviews. Like that question is often raised, and of course there would need to be government intervention. A part of the reparations project would be government interventions to ensure that there's no predatory reaction to Black communities getting this windfall of money. Yeah. So that's definitely something that I agree with, Ivan.
Yeah. Maybe some of those financial literacy people don't really want you to do it because they're going to lose a job. So I don't want you to, I got money now, I'm straight. I don't need you to tell me how to get money. All right. Any other things from the people? Thank y'all for watching. Sorry for all the difficulties, man. This has been a power cut off.
Yeah.
Voice cut off. The video's playing, by the way. We can run that real quick if you want to. But let me see if we got it.
Can we? So you talk about the Katie Porter video?
Yeah.
Mr. Diamond, you're an expert on.
Yeah, I'm gonna play that real quick.
Now, after the fact, it wants to play. Let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and play that real quick.
Yeah, and then we can close off. Y'all got any questions? Just ask the questions through it, and then we'll finish with Asaf for final words after this.
Mr. Diamond, you're an expert on financial statements and you run a $2.6 trillion bank. I know you're good at numbers, and so I'd like to ask for your help on a problem. I went to Monster.com and I found a job in my hometown of Irvine at JP Morgan Chase. It pays $16.50 an hour. When you do the math on this and you do the $16.50 out at 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, it comes out to an income of $35,070. Now, this bank teller, her name is Patricia. She has one child who's 6 years old. She claims the one dependent after tax. She has $29,100 $100. She had $2,425 a month. She rents a one-bedroom apartment. She and her daughter sleep together in the same room. In Irvine, California, that average one-bedroom apartment is going to be $1,600. She spends $100 on utilities. And she has net $725. $400 for car expenses and gas. Net $325. A low food budget is $400. That leaves her $77 in the red. She has a Cricket cell phone, the cheapest cell phone she can get for $40. She's in the red $117 a month. She has after-school childcare because the bank is open during normal business hours. That's $450 a month. That takes her down to negative $567 per month. My question for you, Mr. Diamond, is how should she manage this budget shortfall while she's working full-time at your bank?
I'd love to call up in a conversation about her financial affairs and if we can be helpful.
See if you can find a way for her to live on less than the minimum that I've described.
Just be helpful.
Would you recommend that she take out a JP Morgan Chase credit card and run a deficit?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Would you recommend that she overdraft at your bank and be charged overdraft fees?
Don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Mr. Diamond, you know how to spend $31 million a year in salary, and you can't figure out how to make up a $567 a month shortfall. This is a budget problem you cannot solve.
That number is it generally a starter job?
She is a starting employee. She has a 6-year-old child.
Okay.
This is her first job.
You get those jobs out of high school, she may have my job one day.
Ironically, the next person pop up is Clarence. Oh shoot. Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Yeah, so again, you know, and I wish the video played a little bit further. I mean, that comes from, we got that video from the Washington Post, so I want to credit them. So, and they cut it off before Katie Porter could respond to what Jamie Dimon said about one day she may have my position. And she said, you know, Katie Porter said something to the effect in response to that, something to the effect of, okay, well, yeah, that's all in good, but how does she deal with the $567 budget shortfall now? Not 20 years from now when she's in your position, now. You know, and you know, it's, so again, I reissued that challenge. You just saw what happens. You just saw Katie Porter lay out the budget. You just saw what this single mother, this hypothetical single mother, is doing with her money. She's not splurging it. She's not wasting it. Every penny is accounted for, even to the point where she's doesn't have enough money to cover everything. And she's short 500. I said 500. It's actually $567 a month. All these financial experts tell me how she's supposed to deal with that.
Now, the brothers and the sisters who are experts normally come on the post. So hopefully we'll be able to show up and share some of your practices. You know, maybe she should stop buying Payless shoes and go to Walmart and get flip-flops. Maybe she should invest in Bitcoin with the milk money. I don't know.
How is it supposed to work? Just make it make sense for me. Financial literacy expert. Don't make me start naming names. Make it make sense.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think they're gonna show up now. Maybe they'll show up at the watch party. Any final words before we jump off?
Yeah, I just want to show my appreciation to everyone who stuck with us, even throughout the technical difficulties we were having, and you know, we just want to continue putting out content like this on behalf of the bARTer&Build think tank. I'm appreciative of you, Brother Geechee, for, you know, working with us on this and helping me deal with the technical stuff. I'm not really good at the technical stuff. yeah, we're gonna continue doing these presentations. I'm not sure what the next presentation will be, or even if I'll be doing it. Preferably, I would like to get someone else in the group to do a presentation if they're up to it. But yeah, the goal is to do it on a monthly basis. And also there's the Barter and Build think tank discussion group, study group that we have every Thursday at 8:30. Those are Thursdays at 8:30. Okay, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll the next paper, or the next, we do papers, books, documentaries. We study everything. So next we're studying a paper titled 10 Solutions for Closing the Racial Wealth Gap. That's the title of the paper. 10 Solutions for Closing the Racial Wealth Gap. And we'll be discussing that this coming Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'll post it on our group's page on Facebook, or you can just look online and find the PDF and be prepared for the conversation. Again, the title of the paper is 10 Solutions for Closing the Racial Wealth Gap. Okay. And I appreciate you all, and we appreciate your support, and we hope to hear from you soon.